is that we do not communicate that knowledge to the public.
My name is Ekhtiari, and I'm Associate Investigator at Laureate Institute for Brain Research. Tonight I'm not going to sell anything to you. I'm not going to sell any device or any kind of medication. I'm not going to provide any sort of medical insight or medical oversight to what we are going to present. I'm just going to present you ideas based on my research and my experience with neuroscience about how brain process eating. Okay, when we talk about obesity, we know that there are many medical complications associated with being overweight. We know that potentially tiredness and depression would be significantly related to being overweight. Stroke, intracranial hypertension, cataract, pulmonary diseases, different coronary heart diseases, pancreatitis, diabetes, fatty liver, gallbladder disorders. There are many medical conditions that are associated with obesity. And we know that if we reduce our weight for something like 10% to 15%, the chance of many of these medical conditions would be less than 50% with the weight reduction. But that we know all these problems, but we cannot reduce our weight. That is the problem. Why we know a lot about medical complications of being obese or overweight, but we cannot control our eating. And it's quite interesting that people tried in the field of cigarette smoking. They tried to provide people with information about how smoking could make problems. And then the question was how much these specific labels over cigarette box would help people to reduce their smoking. There are many studies. People try to explore what are the specific labels that are going to be most efficacious in terms of kind of convincing people to quit smoking. People realize over the time that those who have never started to use kind of cigarettes have these labels over their cigarettes, they would potentially have lower risk to start smoking cigarette. But interestingly, those who are smoking, who are already smoking, most of them, when they have these cigarettes with those labels over them, they just smoke more. Because those labels would just make them feel being distressed, and that kind of level of stress would increase the amount of smoking that they would do. So how that could make things more complex. So let's move forward for that. The question is that what did we start to think about eating as a challenge for human being? What are the historical background of kind of being in problem with eating behavior? And I was thinking about that before in terms of when human beings started to struggle with eating behavior. And I was thinking that probably from Adam. Time, I was thinking that it's quite interesting that even in the Garden of Eden, when you read Old Testament and you go to the book of Genesis and you go to the chapter 3, you can see there. From that period, it seems that eating was a struggling issue with the human being, and we have this issue in Old Testament. We have that in Quran discussing about the temptation of kind of eating that fruit from that specific tree that there are different names for that tree as well, and there are lots of methodological, really interesting issues related to that. And after eating, that was basically potentially the original sin or the first sin. Then the issue of sexuality and how people would realize that they are naked in the Garden of Eden, and lots of really other interesting issues related to that how and eating would also be related to the sexuality. And there are other interesting things inside that story that I'm not going to discuss tonight. Potentially we can discuss about that in a full 2 hours talk. What are the interesting issues related to eating and sexual behavior related to that story. But I think that it provides us with an idea that eating is a really fundamental issue in the human history, if we consider Adam and Eve a historical issue. But when we go towards that issue, why this issue is that much complex? Why do we have such a complex problem with eating behavior? The major issue is that we have two major systems inside the brain that are involved in eating behavior. The first one is a homeostatic system that helps us to survive, helps us to be able to live. But the second system, that is the hedonic system, and the hedonic system is involved in pleasure and enjoying from eating. And these two systems are working to each other, and that makes things complex. Both those systems are involved in making your food appetite, your hunger, your food craving, and then they would end up with eating. And there are different inputs to these two complex systems. And what we want to do, we want to eat as our body needs. Meanwhile, we are not going to eat too much as our body expects to have more pleasure. So that is the complex part. How we can make a balance of these two systems together. Why having a control over food is a really important issue. I'm going to tell you a story about marshmallow. I'm not sure how many of you have heard about a really famous experiment by a guy. His name is Walter Mischel. Walter Mischel. One person here, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So, professor of psychology in Stanford University in 1968. He was born in 1930. He's from a Jewish family from Austria, and he moved to US in 1938. And he is right now, he still works in Columbia University. He did a really interesting experiment in 1964. He asked a group of kids at the age of 4 years old that you can have this war if you he basically put a marshmallow in front of the kid, and kids are supposed to wait for a few minutes, and if they wait they receive another marshmallow. Okay, that's the story. And many people try to kind of reproduce the scenario and the scene and the experiment, and there are videos for that. I'm sure that many of you have seen those videos, but I've seen those videos many times. But tonight I'm going to show one of those videos again. I'm going to ask you, look to the kids' faces and try to see what are the strategies that those kids use to control their food craving at the age of 4 years old. Okay? So let me bring up the video.
Okay, sit in that chair. All right, here's the deal. Marshmallow, for you. You can either wait, and I'll give you another one if you wait, or you can eat it now. When I come back, I'll give you another one, so then you'll have two. But stay in here and stay in the chair till I come back, okay? All right. I'm gonna go do something and then I'll come back.
It smells yummy. It smells really good.
It's up to you. You can have it now or you can wait. Okay? I'll be back. Stay in the chair, okay? Okay. Alright, so I'm going to leave and then I'll come back, okay? So you can either eat it right now or you can wait. Either way, okay? Okay. How'd you do? Did you do good? You did?
Yeah.
You wanted to eat it, didn't you? Yeah. So did I tell you to give you another one? Okay, now you can have both. You need them.
This one would even leave the room, not waiting for the experimenter to be back. So you can see that kids, even at the age of 4 years old, they can use many different strategies. I'm not going to provide a list of different strategies, but people explore this issue and they realize that kids, even kids at the age of 4 years old, they can have many different strategies trying to control. But one of the really interesting things about this experiment in 1964, so they did this study in 1964. In 2008, they were thinking that how we might be able to ask these kids that now are 44 years old, be back to the lab and see how do they do right now at the age of 44. And they have been successful. They have been able to recall many of those kids, and they have seen those kids, they have different levels of education, different levels of kind of economic status, levels of success in the society. And they realize that the amount of time that those kids were waiting for the kind of marshmallow at the age of 4 years were highly correlated to amount of their success at the age of 44. So how these kind of really basic things could change kind of many different aspects of our lives. So it is not just about food and being in control for food. It is a really more complex issue. Okay, I'm going to start with really basic concepts in the field of food and eating, and then I would go towards brain and how brain would be involved in these processes. In the basic concepts, we have two major feelings that are distinct from each other, and sometimes we just mix them up. One would be hunger, that would be mainly mediated by our homeostatic system. And it would mean that we really need something to eat. So it is a representation of our body that would need glucose or other material. And the other is food craving. And these two feelings, they have distinct features. And there are many people that they cannot differentiate them from each other. When we are hungry, we are ready to eat everything. We are ready to eat anything that somebody would provide us. So it doesn't matter that it's a specific type of food or not. But when we talk about food craving, it's about a specific type of food. I'm looking for this specific type of food. I'm not gonna eat everything. I'm just looking for this specific type of food. So, and there are even different body feelings associated with these two types of kind of body states. And interestingly, I realized over time that there are many people that they cannot differentiate them together. So one of the things that we usually do in the class sessions or in the therapy sessions, we start with people discussing about what are the differences between these two completely different body feelings. And then when we talk about food craving, in food craving we talk about two major issues. One would be cue-induced craving by external cues. So there are specific external cues that provides us with the food craving. For example, let's say that I'm going to ask you, we have a really delicious brownie here with a hot chocolate over the brownie, and it's from really good pastry. So how much you would rate your food craving to eat it from 0 to 10? From 0 to 10, Colin.
Actually, I don't like brownies.
2. Okay, good. That's exactly. So it's not an external trigger for you. It's not a food cue. Marvin. 8. Mr. Darvandi. 10. Okay, so we know that people, it could be a trigger for a group of people, but it could be not that much attractive for others. Or other types of brownies, okay? Or brownies with blackberries. So a combination of brownies or blackberries. Or chocolate cakes. So I can ask you whether they are going to be an external food cues for you or not. But basically, those external cues could provide you with a cue-induced craving. And the other type of cue-induced craving would be related to the time that you feel depressed, distressed, you feel being rejected, you feel being exhausted or fatigued. And on those occasions, you have another type of cue-induced craving. And you have internal cues that trigger your food craving. And interestingly, there are different brain mechanisms involved in these two types of external environmental cues and cues that are from our internal body, or they are from our imagination, or those which are related to the stressors and negative feelings. And even those who have an experience of doing cigarette smoking, they know that those who are doing cigarette smoking, sometimes they just need to smoke because they are in stress. And sometimes they need to smoke because there are external food cues, external drug-related cues. And this is, for example, the pipes that those who are using meth, they have kind of, when they see those external cues, they really like to use meth. So those who have an experience of kind of using drugs, they know that even with the smoking, sometimes you smoke because others are smoking, or there is a smoking sign, or there is a cigarette. And the other times you smoke because of feeling that you are depressed. And there are occasions that you even smoke without any of those things. That would be close to what we talk as hunger. Okay? So we have three major types of kind of appetite for food. What are the practical implications? So in each section of the talk, I'm going to also be back and think about what are the practical implications from what we are learning right now. How our understanding about, let's say, we have three different types of desire for food. How it might be helpful. Most of the time, with those who are in kind of the process of reducing weight, we tell them you are supposed to respond to hunger. So you are not supposed to control your hunger. Because when you put your body in starvation without responding to hunger, it would make a rebounding effect, and it would have negative effects in long term. So you just make your body greedy, and you would start to kind of absorb fat and try to just restore everything inside your body. So you are supposed to respond to hunger, but you are supposed not to respond to your cue-induced craving. And how people can learn to differentiate these two feelings from each other and try to respond to hunger, but not to respond to cue-induced craving is an interesting issue. And then people would start also to realize what are the internal and external triggers for them. For example, for Kaveh, brownie is not a trigger. Or for Marvin, it would be a significant kind of cue. So how we might be able to understand what are the cues different people and how they might be able to prevent to be exposed to the cue. So there are specific implications and practical outcomes from these understandings. And then let's move forward and try to bring more knowledge about how brain would process. I'm going to discuss about a process that has different components inside. Tonight I'm going to discuss about these components one by one, and we are going to see how these components are going to be important. I'm not going to discuss about these components right now, but I will be back to this graph, and we will discuss how this process of being exposed to, to the environmental cues that would be food-related cues or emotional stress-related cues would end up with response that would be eating. There are many people that they think that we have cues and we have eating. So there is nothing between. But in reality, that there are many things that would happen in the middle that would end up with dieting or restraining eating or controlling eating or eating behavior. And we are going to discuss about these different cognitive and brain processes that would end up with the response. Okay? So, let's go. And we are going to talk about 7 major brain circuits and how these 7 major brain circuits are going to be important. The first circuit would be about some deep areas inside the brain. We call them limbic system. There are different areas that are involved in limbic system. nucleus accumbens, amygdala, and some other areas inside the brain, and also hippocampus. I would discuss about hippocampus later on. But these two major areas are potentially the most important areas in the limbic circuit of our brain. How these parts of the brain would respond to the cues. Let's start from this picture. What are the differences between these two pictures? Those who have seen those pictures, please do not tell others about that. Just kind of take a look inside and see what are the differences. Interestingly, if people would have just 5 seconds to see these pictures, most of the time they would not be able to differentiate. But, so they would tell there is no difference, I cannot see any difference. But if we ask people to rate beauty of these two pictures independently, one of the pictures would receive more rating and more positive rating for the beauty. If I zoom into the pictures, you can see one of the pictures would have larger pupil size, and the other would have a smaller pupil size. Interestingly, in 5 seconds you cannot differentiate them. You cannot see the difference. But interestingly, if I show these pictures to you when you scanner and we are seeing inside your brain, we can detect that one area deep inside your brain that we call amygdala. When you see the picture with larger pupil, it would have higher activation in the left amygdala and right amygdala. In both sides, you have higher activations. When you see briefly picture that has larger pupils. So we know that there are brain areas that would respond rapidly to environmental cues without our conscious understanding. So they unconsciously process those things, and they can even bias us in terms of which picture would be more beautiful or more attractive than the other. So we know that there are areas in the deep parts of the brain that are processing and they are active without our consciousness. And that's a really important implication when we are talking about how brain would process food-related cues. We know that food-related cues would be able to be processed in deep parts of the brain that are conscious or are unconscious or subconscious. So there are many things that are happening inside our brain when we see these pictures without our conscious understanding. And then the question is that, is there any chance that we can bring those areas to the light of consciousness or not? Is our understanding about brain would help us to be able to bring those unconscious processes to the light of consciousness or not? And I think it's possible. And I think that there are specific kind of strategies that people can realize based on indirect evidence, based on the indirect evidences that they have inside their body, to recognize what are the things that are happening inside my brain, in the unconscious part of the brain. I'm not going to discuss about the details, but there are potential hopes that our understanding about these deep areas inside our brain would help us to have a better understanding about how these unconscious processings are biasing our behavior. The second network. The second network would be related to the memory. And if you remember the previous slide that I showed you, amygdala is basically, in the previous slide, is attached to another part of the brain that is called hippocampus. And we all know hippocampus that is involved in memory. So memory and emotional processings in the deep parts of the brain, they are deeply connected to each other. Okay? And as you can see here as well, so you can see this is amygdala and this is hippocampus. And that is why most of the time when we have an emotional experience of something, it would be recorded in our videos really strongly. That is the main reason that these two areas are talking to each other. And basically amygdala is something like a window to the hippocampus. That information would go from amygdala, they would process from their emotional and appetitive content, and then they would go through hippocampus, and then they would be recorded in hippocampus. And there are many other areas that would be connected to hippocampus. So we know that it's not just about hippocampus. Many parts of our cortex and the gray areas of the kind of the surface of the brain, they would be interacting with hippocampus. And hippocampus would not record everything inside itself. It would just categorize different information, and it would put them in different parts of the outside. So we record information over the cortex, but who knows where are different information? This is hippocampus. So hippocampus would track records of where it puts different parts of the information over the cortex. So when you lose your hippocampus, you might still have all those information in your cortex, but you don't know where to find them. And that's the main reason that sometimes you just lose the track of the information. They are still there, but you cannot find them. And it's a long story, I'm not going to go into depths of that. The major issue is that we know that our eating behavior is highly related to our memories. We know our eating behavior is highly related to the memories that we made with food in our entire life. How we made memories with food from our childhood, when we were eating with our parents, with our kids, with our friends, with our family, with our wife. So how we made lots of memories over time. And then the question would be, is there any chance that we can change those memories? Is there a chance that we can erase those memories? How many of you have heard about river of Lethe? The river of Lethe. When you go to old Greek mythology, when you go discuss about old Greek myth, there is an interesting story regarding a river in the underground world that is called Lethe. It's written something like, here you can see the Lethe, but it's called Lethe. And Lethe is a small river that if you you would forget your memories. And people would go there to be able to forget some of their memories. So the water of that river is kind of designed to erase your memory. So even when you go back to the Greek culture, something like more than 2,000 years ago, people were looking for something to erase their memories. So that is something that people are really interested to have. And even nowadays, we are sometimes interested to be able to erase our memories. I'm not sure how many of you have seen this movie, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Yeah, that's a kind of amazing. It's really hard to say it's a comedy, but it talks about people who are looking for a technology to be able to erase their memories. And they want to see how they might be able to erase their memories. So we know that people are interested to be able to erase their memories. is this really possible or not? And we know that there are people who are suffering of having bad memories. Those who have post-traumatic stress disorders, those who have significant psychological traumas, or those who are using drugs. I have patients and people who are suffer from drug addiction. They can tell me many memories, and even when they go to bed and they sleep, they still have lots of nightmares related to drug use. And that is one of their major challenge, that how they might be able to change those memories in a way that would help them to be able to go for recovery. Is there any chance for that? We know that there's a process of recording memories. We call it consolidation. We learn something and we store the information. Recently we realized there are potentials when we remind memories and we reactivate memories, we potentially can change them and then reconsolidate them again. So there are potentials that we might be able to change memories in a positive or negative way, both sides. And this is one of the interesting things. I'm right now I'm working on developing a pipeline for being able to do that. But there are many detailed experimental designs how we might be able to modulate memories. And even in the clinical practice, you would realize that when you talk about a memory, then that specific memory could be vulnerable for a few minutes. So you can reshape it and you can reconsolidate it again back to the memory. And as a therapist, how you might be able to handle it in the proper way, not to make things worse, that is, there are many techniques for that. And so people realize that there are potentials for changing memories. How we might be able to use that, I'm not going to discuss about that. But so the first network was limbic or deep areas inside the brain. The second was memory. The third would be prefrontal cortex. We discussed that there are deep areas inside the brain that would basically generate impulses and emotions. And there are areas in the frontal areas in the brain that they basically control those emotions and impulses. And one of the areas that is really important in this field is called dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. That is the area here. So it is on the top of your prefrontal cortex, and it would basically effortfully control your food craving and impulses. Okay, what are the features of this prefrontal control? If you are going to use this option in our brain, we need to know about different features of this option, okay? Let me tell you a story or describe an experiment that could give you an idea about the features of this forceful control. Let's think that after we have a break and we are going to go outside, and there is something like ice cream bar or ice cream buffet outside, okay? And people who are in the hall, they would be in two groups. One group of people would be those who are dieting, and those who are non-dieting people, okay? So let's think that we are two groups of people. Half would be dieting and half would not be dieting. We would go outside and there would be a ice cream buffet, okay? Even thinking about that would be attractive, right? Okay, so in that scenario, we know that those who are dieting would probably eat less compared to those who are dieting, right? Is it true? That is kind of what we are expecting. Those who are dieting, they would eat less. Okay. Let me do the experiment again on another day. Before sending you out of eating the ice creams, I would provide each of you with a tray that would have small glasses something like really small ones, that you can, and there are 6 different types of milkshakes there. And you are supposed to just taste these 6 types of milkshakes and tell me which one would be more delicious. Okay, so you are supposed to select between these 6 types of milkshakes. And after doing the experiment, so you just kind of taste those milkshakes, and then you would go outside and you would have the ice cream bar. What would happen to those who are dieting and those who are not dieting? This is what is going to happen. Those who are not dieting, as they have already eaten something, they would eat less ice cream because they have already had something. They do not have that level of kind of hunger. But interestingly, those who are dieting, they would eat more. Why? Why, when we give people something, it would not basically kill their hunger, but it's basically increase the level of craving that they have? It's quite interesting that those who are dieting, most of the time those who are dieting around us, they are using their dorsolateral prefrontal cortex to control their eating behavior. The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the prefrontal areas in the top of your head, those areas, they effort-free control, but they are something like a brake. When you make a problem for the brake once, the brake would not work in the second phase. So when you loosen up the brake, it would not work then. And if you use the brake once, it would not work for the next phase. So one of the challenges with those types of kind of brakes is that they have limited resources. They cannot work forever. When you use your effort for control, it would just work for a short while, because it's really effortful and it needs lots of energy. So those who are dieting or those who are controlling their diet, if they eat something really kind of minimally, they would have a higher level of craving and they eat more. So if they start to eat a small piece of food, they would go to the end. And they know if they are supposed to eat, not to eat something, they are supposed to, they shouldn't start. If they start, what we call sleep-induced craving. If they just drink a little dose, they would go to the end. Because that would basically break the control that they have. And we know that prefrontal control is not something like a skill. It is not a skill. It's something like an energy. So you have the energy. As far as you have the energy, you can control. So the first feature is that it is a limited resource of energy. Okay, first. The second feature of prefrontal control, we call it the control is domain general. What does it mean? When we talk about deep areas inside the brain, inside the brain, we call them domain specific. What does it mean? When we generate different emotions, let's say anger, depression, sense of rejection, all those different types of emotions, or food craving, or sex craving, they have different patterns of activations in the deep part of the brain. So they differentially get activated in the deep part of the brain. But interestingly, we call them domain-specific activations. But prefrontal cortex would have a domain general activation. What does it mean? It means that it has this one single resource for controlling all those emotions and impulses. So there is no different resources for different types of emotion impulses. So if you basically use your limited resource of energy for controlling your anger, you would be out of energy to be able to control your food craving. So and we know that the resource is limited. So knowing about the features of this control would help us to see whether we are going to use it or not, and how much is going to be helpful in long term. And we have a specific term that we call ego depletion. Is a time that you have used all the energy that you have in your limited resource of energy for prefrontal control. So you would feel that I'm not in control at all. I cannot control anything, because you do not have any energy remain in your limited resource. So there would be lots of questions. How we might be able to fill in this limited of resource of energy? How we might be able to fill in the energy? People realize if you even take a look inside in your face, in the mirror, it will increase your control. So most of the time when you go to different bars, even if they have mirrors in the bars, you cannot see yourself in the mirrors. Because if in the bar you can see yourself in the mirror, you would have higher control and you probably drink less. But you see others in the mirrors. If they design the bar in the kind of right way, it is supposed to be in a way that you see others in the mirrors, and that would induce your craving. But you are not supposed to see yourself in the mirror. If you see yourself in the mirror, it would increase your energy control of the energy that you have for control, and you can control, and you would drink less. So, and there are many other things related to that. For example, when you go to Costco, you are supposed to have, there is a large new Infinity car in front of the Costco. And you are probably not supposed to buy an Infinity car when you are going to buy potatoes and onions. But what is the function of that big jet ski in front of the Costco when you go to buy onions and potatoes? Or what is the kind of the main reason that people put kind of fancy cameras and things whenever you go into the kind of big shops? In the first look you would have large, let's say LED TVs, and you are not supposed to buy a 120 inches LED TV, but you really like to do it. So you would get him, should I buy it? And you are not supposed to buy it. So you would control yourself. But basically you use your limited resource of energy, then you buy more potatoes. So it is designed to be in this way. And whenever you go to many different shops in different countries, they have different tricks to handle that issue. So how we might be able to reduce wasting of the energy, and there are many kind of make people be exhausted and be ego depleted when they are inside the stores, because we really like them not to be in control when they shop in our store. And the third question would be, is there a chance that we can increase the size of resource? We have bigger bank of energy in our brain. And there are many studies for that as well. I'm not going to go into the depths of that. There are many interesting things how we might be able to increase the size of that bank. Okay? So we discussed about 3 networks till now. The network that would be controlling and generating. So we talked about generating impulses in the deep areas inside the brain, and the controlling network. What is the fourth network? The fourth network would be the network that is involved in appraising and evaluating the importance of those impulses and emotions and temptations. And this is a really important part of the brain. Sometimes it would you just have a craving in the first look, but you would realize that what would be the negative consequences of doing this? What are the really bad things that are embedded in a brownie? if I see what are the challenges that specific filet mignon steak is going to make to my heart, when you start to reappraise those, you might feel that I'm not in craving anymore. So there are many specific strategies to help people to start reappraising part of their brain, help them to reframe and restructure and have another look to what is really happening. So that is another network. So the fourth network. I'm going to discuss about more details about that in the next steps. So the fourth network would be the reappraising and restructuring network. The fifth network would be about verbalization and inhibition. When I put people inside MRI, and in different kind of scenarios, and I want to see how much people are able to control their craving. Most of the time I put people inside the MRI scanner and I show them images related to drug, because they are drug users and they have craving to drug cues. And I see different activations inside their brain when they see those drug-related pictures. One of the kind of question that we have is that who would be successful in controlling craving over the time? So, for example, I have a patient that is in recovery for, let's say, 2 weeks, and I'm going to predict that whether he or she would be successful in 1 year of recovery or not. Interestingly, I realized those who have high activations in their prefrontal areas, in the third network, the effortful control network, they potentially would fail. They really like to control their craving, but they are using a brake that is not really efficacious. They just want to effortfully control everything, but they cannot. But interestingly, if they have activations in areas that are in the kind of lower areas of the prefrontal cortex in both sides, my hypothesis is that they would be more successful. I'm right now working on that, but I've had lots of personal experiences of seeing those who have higher activations in these areas. We call it inferior frontal gyrus here. They would be more successful. And interestingly, this part of the brain has a specific function inside the brain. One of its major function is that this is the eloquent part of the brain. We basically talk with this part of the brain. So interestingly, this part of the brain has two major functions. One, control, and the other is verbalization, and talk about something. And interestingly, in my understanding, these two functions are highly related to each other. So when we talk about something, we bring that thing to the consciousness. And probably one of the most conscious part of the brain is those areas in the prefrontal cortex areas, those areas that are related to our language and our verbalization. When we start to talk about a feeling, we would have activations here, and we would start to be consciously processing that feeling, and it seems that we would be more successful with that part of the brain. So I realized that people who have a good understanding about these three areas and how they interact with each other, how we reappraise, what are the times that we need to use our effort for control, and how verbalization would be helpful. These areas are going to control the food craving. And when we have group therapy sessions with people, most of the time we just try to use all these strategies to help people to control. But let me add the sixth network. The sixth network would be something that we call interoception. It would be related to an area that is deep to the frontal areas inside the brain. It's called insula. It's something like an island deep to our brain. It would be from the cortical gray matter, but it goes down to the brain, and we call it insular cortex. What we do with insular cortex? With insular cortex, we do interoceptive processing. What does it mean? It means that we would start to see what is happening inside our body. and we would get connected to our body, and we would understand what are the different feelings that are happening, what are the things that are happening inside my body, how I might be able to differentiate between craving and hunger, and should I respond to that or not? Do I really need that or not? Does my body really need that food or not? And that connection seems that is going to be really important part of the controlling process. And those who are able to use that network, they are really great in controlling their emotions and their appetites, including food craving. And just to give people, I usually use cartoons to communicate with people, and I've actually put some of the kind of initial drafts that we make for these cartoons. This is the final version. So we start from really simple things, and then we would move forward for that. But we really want to know what are the things that are happening inside our body, and we need that information to be able to be in control. Okay? So till now we discussed about 6 networks. Okay? Let me give you another idea about these networks. It's not just about these 6 networks that are going to interact, and we are going to talk about just 7 networks. So we are going to the end of the talk. So just getting sure that we will not talk for the next 3 hours, probably another 1 hour. So that will be it. So let me kind of ask you to do a simple experiment. Please close your eyes for just 2 minutes and try to do nothing. And please do not sleep because it's 8 p.m. So close your eyes for 2 minutes and try to do nothing. It's hard, right? Okay. What are your experiences of doing nothing for 2 minutes? First of all, it's interesting when we ask people not to do anything. When we see inside the brain and we see how much the brain is using using energy. Interestingly, when you are supposed to do nothing, your brain is as active as you are doing really complex mental calculations. So your brain will still use the same amount of energy. And the question is why? Why when we are supposed to do nothing, our brain is still really active? So that is a challenging question. What are the things that my brain is involved? Interestingly, when you are supposed to do nothing, a network in your brain would get activated. And this network, we call it default mode network. This network has different parts involved in your brain. You would start to feel different body feelings that you usually do not feel. For example, you can just feel that there is an itching sense in the kind of bottom of your toe. So you just feel some specific body feelings that you do not kind of feel when you are in doing lots of different things. You would start to bring memories that are related to yourself. You would start to realize, wow, I owe that amount of money to another person, or I was supposed to do something tonight, but I forgot. So you would start to do some self-referential processing. And there are some other processes that are related to this network of different circuits inside the brain. So in the default mode network activations, we have components from the saliency processing, from the limbic area. So there are some components of different networks in the default mode network, okay? And yeah, this is the default mode network. And we can see the default mode network when we put people inside the scanner, okay? But let's do some calculation. I'm going to ask you some questions, okay? Elham, what would be 13 multiplies 12?
156.
156, good. Nikki, the next is yours.
180.
Okay. Bohan, the next is yours. Yeah. Okay, so when you are supposed to do mental calculations, you are in an executive mode. So you are going to put, and it's a completely different mode of brain activations. And people realize that there would be another network inside the brain that would get activated. So we call it the executive control network. And these two networks, it seems that they are in counterbalance, because our brain does not have enough energy to spend in both networks. So you can have your default mode network up and your executive control network down, or vice versa. And when you are doing executive control network activities, your default mode network would be down. And when your default mode network is down, you would not feel your body sensation. You would not process self-referential memories. You would not start to even be creative. Interesting, people realize that creativity would be related to the time that your default mode network is activated. You would not be creative when your executive control network is up. Okay? For example, when you talk about Archimedes or Newton, when they discovered their major discoveries, when they have been in hot tube, or they have been in, let's say, under the apple tree. So those default mode times that we are basically creative. And so there are different functions that are attributed to these networks, and then we can have one or the other. And one of the challenges for the field of craving is that how these networks are involved on that issue. Okay, let me just kind of go for that. It seems that we have. Let me just tell you another small story. We have another network, it's called saliency network. And it seems that the saliency network is involved in controlling whether we are supposed to go to the default mode or executive control mode. Okay? And these modes are something like different gears. So when you are in the first gear, that you have, I'm not sure, there are many people here that never experienced manual cars, but those who have been kind of the era that they have been using manual cars, you know that different gears would have different functions. So when you put your car in the first gear, it would have specific functions that would not have in the gear 4. So you can see that different gears. So default mode network and executive control networks are like different gears. And when you are in different gears, your brain would have different types of functions. When we are seeing environmental cues, I mean food-related cues, our brain would go to the default mode side. So we feel that I cannot study, I cannot do calculation anymore. I'm hungry. I just feel I need that food. I'm thinking about that specific kind of type of sandwich that I like to have. So, and on that mode, you feel that I cannot study anymore. I cannot do any calculation. I just need to go and eat something. Okay. So because your executive control network is down and your default mode network is up. And interestingly, when you are on that mode, you just feel that I have lots of memories related to eating. Lots of those memories, because that default mode network is related to bringing up your self-referential memories. And also you have lots of feelings inside your body. Oh, I just feel my stomach is just moving and I just need to have food. So you would be on that mode. But when you are in control, you would go to another side. If I give you a specific mental calculation task, when you are in food craving, in 2-3 minutes you would realize that I do not have a craving anymore, because now I'm effort fully to the executive control. So how these networks are interacting to each other. And there there are questions that is there any chance that we can train people in a way that they could easily go to the default mode or to the executive control with their intention and with their own control, and just go to one deeply and come out? Because we need default mode network in many occasions. We need to be in default mode network, but we need to be able to be out of that without doing something wrong when we are in the default mode network, and then doing execute. So how we might be able to train? And it seems that when we do different sort of exercises, people would start to learn how to do that. And one of the best type of exercises would be potentially meditation. Those who are doing meditation would help them to go deep into the default mode and then come out of it easily. So they do not have any inertia to go to default mode without being able to be back. So they have many experience of going to the deep of the default mode and then coming back. And that experience of being in control, even doing simple things, people realize if even they do something like simple coloring, those adult coloring kind of mandalas and other things, even those who are doing these sort of kind of quick, dirty ways of doing meditation, even those types of experiences, they would help them to be able to be in more control, because they would understand how to go back and forth and use these two complex networks to be able to be in control. So there are specific implications for learning about these networks and how they work together. And now the seventh network. The last network is about habit, and it would include another part of the brain that we call cerebellum. Cerebellum is a part of the brain that is involved when you learn a specific skill. For example, if I play piano right now, I would use just my frontal part of the brain, just trying to see how I can play piano. But those who are expert pianists, they would be able to do it completely with their cerebellum, because it's a skill. They just do it automatically. They do not need any control for that. But unfortunately, some of those people who are eating, in their eating behavior, they would make habitual eatings. And they eat with their cerebellum. And I'm going to talk to let you know what are the features of habitual eating. Okay, when we eat with craving, we have interactions between anterior and kind of frontal parts of the brain. There is an interaction between deep areas here in the brain. This is the frontal part, this is the occipital, the front and back part of the brain. You have interaction between front parts of the deep areas inside the brain and frontal areas, so they would interact to each other. Okay, that is the impulsive eating behaviors. But when you bring up your posterior parts of the brain, the back parts of the brain and cerebellum, the eating would be habitual and compulsive. So the eating would not be that much passionate. You just feel that if you do not eat, you would feel anxious. So you can see that feeling among many people, that they eat huge amount of mashed potato or rice or cookies or lots of other, and they are not really delicious. I mean, they are not really attractive, but they feel that if we do not eat that amount of food, we just feel anxious. We eat that comfort food like cheese and macaron just to get calm. And it would be something like those people who have obsessive compulsive disorders. They wash their hands not because if they wash their hands, they would have lots of pleasure of washing their hands. They wash their hands because if they do not wash their hands, they would have lots of anxiety. So they wash it not to have pleasure, like the left side, they do it because if they don't do it, they would have lots of anxiety. And when they start to reduce the amount of carbohydrates inside their diet, they would just feel that I feel anxious, and I really don't like the feeling of jitteriness right now, and I really don't like it. I cannot kind of bear with that. So it's not just about eating salad. It's just when you eat. I mean, when you reduce the amount of carbohydrates, because they have the habitual. And that is one of the, let's say, more complex parts of the eating behavior that needs more intervention and long time kind of control and lots of other things. But that is a really kind of deeply wired parts of the eating that would make things more complex. Okay, now we discuss about these 7 networks. And as I mentioned, that there is a flow of different processes together that would start from the first phase. Let me just go back. Yeah, this will start from the initial processes, saliency processes, interoceptive processes, controlling process, memory, and these things are interacting to each other. Okay. This phase would be attention. Today I didn't discuss about attention, attentional network. Potentially attention could be another complete talk, how attention would be important. And here we discuss mainly about bottom-up processes that are related to the limbic areas. And the top-down attentional processes would be related to mainly frontal areas. But we discussed about saliency processing, we discussed about interoception, we discussed about executive control, we discussed about memory. So it is not just we see something and we eat it. There are many things that are happening in between. And each of these processes, there are specific interventions for these processes. And as much as we know about this process, we would be able to be in more control. Let me show you the last video that I'm going to show you tonight about domino effect. And domino effect is a really important issue that I think that is going to be really important for having a better understanding about, let's bring this here. Okay, so
everybody knows about playing with dominoes. What you may not know is that a domino can knock over another domino, which is about 1.5 times. So what I have here is a chain of dominoes. Each one is 1.5 times larger than the previous one. The smallest domino is about 5 millimeters high, 1 millimeter thick. Carefully place it. There are 13 dominoes. The largest domino, it weighs about 100 pounds and is more than a meter tall. Ready? Ooh. That was 13 dominoes. If I had 29 dominoes, the last domino would be as tall as the Empire State Building.
Just with 29 dominoes, it would be at the size of Empire State Building. So, why it is important for what we have been discussing right now? Let me see. The major issue about craving is that when we start from these kind of simple processes in the first steps, they would get more and more complex to control. So if we want to stop eating craving and food craving, we need to stop it from the initial steps. The far we go with the craving, it would be more and more and more and stronger, and you cannot control it anymore. So when you see and you process and you are in craving and you are in default mode control network and you are feeling it would be really hard to control it. So if you want to stop those dominoes, you need to stop them from the first steps. And there are specific interventions how we might be able to handle that as well. The specific term, we call it metacognition. This is one of my last slides. Metacognition is cognition over cognition. What does it mean? It means that we would start to see what is happening inside our brain. So we would have a level of understanding to see right now what are the things that are happening inside my brain. Now I have activations in my memory areas. Now I have activation in amygdala. Now I have interoceptive processing. Now I have having an understanding about these processes. And it seems that metacognition is a, let's say, highest order function for the brain if the brain would start to see what is happening inside itself. And it would be processed by areas in the kind of really last parts of the brain that would evolve over time, that is really unique to human being, that is in the kind of, we call it frontal pole. And those frontal polar areas, they are in control. If you train them, they would be able to see what is happening inside your brain when you are in emotional states or in food craving or other states. And I realized over time that people, if they start to do brain exercises, I call them brain gym, as we do physical exercises and we start to realize we have different muscles. Those who are going to gym, they would say, oh, there are many different muscles in my arm, there are different muscles in my... And I can work on lots of different muscles, and each muscle would have its own type of exercise. You need to do like this and this and this to be able to have different kind of muscles involved. But for a simple person like me, I just feel that there is one muscle and one bone here. But those who are doing lots of kind of physical exercise, they would realize, oh, there are many muscles, and each of them would have their own specific type of functions. And this is exactly true for brain. Sometimes we just feel that there is something here and it's doing something, and I just see something and I eat and I do not know what is really happening inside. And I realized one of the best ways to be able to understand about brain would be doing exercises with brain. When you do exercise with brain, and not just simple exercises, that's like exercise that people are selling outside. No, specific exercises that would be associated with a level of understanding. That is, this exercise is for your attention. It's for your flexible attention. This is for your divided attention. This is for your shifting attention. There are many types of different attention, and each type of attention would have its own function, and this exercise would activate that. And it's not just using those exercises to increase the strength of those activities. It's also about giving us an idea about what are these functions. Because when you go to gym, you would start to see, first of all, it's not just about increasing the strength of these muscles. It would be starting to seeing the muscles in the first place. Just seeing that you have different muscles, and there are different functions for these muscles. And I realized these types of interventions in terms of being able to understand what is happening inside the brain, they are really durable. So they are not something like a pill that would last for a few hours. Some of these interventions would last forever. When you learn what is really happening there, you would have it forever. And they are really durable. So they are not something like a specific dieting that people would do for a few months and they control for weight for a few months. It's forever. It's a lifestyle. This is kind of a long-term or lifetime change. I'm trying to put all these things together in a book. Right now I'm thinking for a title like Brain Obesity, something like that. I'm just still kind of thinking about the name. I've written the book. It has 24 chapters and 24 steps, and each step would have specific educations for different brain areas. And I'm right now planning with Niki, we are discussing together to run something like a class, 24 sessions of weekly classes for something like 1 hour and 30 minutes, something like that, and to discuss about those functions and how we might be able to activate them and improve them. Right now, kind of, and the class is going to be something like, I don't know, free, or we are not going to make money out of it. We are just kind of learning about how it's going to work. Kind of, my institute is paying me enough to be able to survive here, so we are not going to make money out of it. We are just thinking that I'm really interested to see how much it is going to be helpful for people. And just take home notes. First, it seems that I have just 10 take-home notes. One would be, it seems that environmental cues are more important than what we were expecting before. The first small domino would be environmental cues. And you are more in control to your environment compared to controlling other brain functions inside your brain, because there are bigger dominoes. So if you are going to stop something, you need to stop it from the first place. And we have a specific type of intervention, we call them environmental engineering. And it seems easy, but it is really hard. And I realize it's really hard to engineer your refrigerator. Just get rid of different things. And people are dependent to them. And they cannot even put out anything from the refrigerator. And I realize that we have food for something like several months in our refrigerators and freezers. And we just keep them there. So we know that there would not be a famine. So we are not expecting that everything would be. We know that we would have enough supply, and I have a friend, he has something like a small refrigerator in the size of something like this, and he feels that is even too much. But we have huge refrigerators at home, and we just keep them. And it's really hard to even, sometimes people think that this is easy, I would just handle everything, but over time they realize it's not easy as they feel. The other issue that I realized, that people think that obesity is something hereditary. They are all, my father, my grandfather, everyone in my family, they are all kind of chubby. But people realize that it's not about your family, it's about your environment. It's about who are your friends, who are the people around you. It's not about their genetic linkage to you. It's about how they make your environment. What are the people around you? And it seems that having friends who are obese would be the most important predictor whether you are obese or not. It's not about your father or your mother. People who are around you, whether they are your family or they're just your friends. Okay, so environmental cues. The second would be, we discussed about circuit 1. The circuit 1 was involved in generating craving. Circuit 2 was involved in food memories. Circuit 3 was about effort for control. It was about frontal control. Circuit 4, reappraising and reframing and seeing things from different scope. Circuit 5, verbalizing and consciously control. This is not effortful control, it's another level of control. Circuit 6 would be brain-body connection. And circuit 7 was about habitual eating. So these 7 circuits would basically process our food related behaviors and their interactions. We discussed about default mode network and executive network, how they have combinations of different networks and how they interact to each other. And we discussed about the importance of your knowledge about your brain and how the knowledge about your brain would help you to control your eating behavior. I should thank many people for today's talk. I have one of my students, Megadi, she's really kind of helping me to put kind of the book together and finalize the material for the book. Hopefully it would be out really soon. I have 2 colleagues, they are brilliant cartoonists, Lale and Naim, who basically kind of They are drawing all the cartoons that you saw today. We are making them at home, and there are many other cartoons that we are developing for this series. I have a really nice graphic designer, Mohsen, who's involved in making all those kind of book covers and the other things. Sahar is involved in making the book kind of a really good product. At the end, we have proofreading editors here, Victoria, Niki from University of Tulsa. He was behind the entire kind of process. He essentially motivated me to do this talk tonight, and I should really thank him for doing everything. And without him, it was not possible to make it happen for tonight. So thank you, Niki. We should just thank Niki for all the arrangements without his motivation, I was really lazy to be able to do it. And I should thank Martin Paulos, who is my postdoc supervisor, and now he is my mentor and the head of the Laureate Institute for Brain Research, and people there in Laureate Institute for Brain Research who are supporting me to be able to run research related to impulses and craving and how we might be able to control them. Thank you very much for your attention. So I was supposed to talk for 1 hour and 30 minutes, and I talked for 89 minutes. So right on time, just 1 minute short. And so you can see the clock here. Okay, so but I would be here to answer questions.
So, thank you so much, Ahmed, for perfect presentation. And I appreciate everyone coming. And so we have a few moments for Q&A. Do you have any questions?
But those who are going to leave, please, feel free to leave. I know it's
not anymore. Okay, so we were talking about the classes. So we're really eager to put together a 24-session classes, and I'm preparing a note. It's handwritten and it's a little bit messy. I'm sorry for that, but I need your contact information so we can either call you or email you right after this. We're thinking about either Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. So, like in my case, those 3 days work for me. But just put the days the first column is either Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The time I think is going to be about...
I would suggest you just not to make that much complex. Let's kind of have people's contact info, because right now they might be a bit excited and they write something and they would kind of change their mind after. So I would suggest you to just ask people, those who are interested to attend the class, just put their contact info. And then, and Niki, okay. And then Niki would be in touch with you, knocking your door every day that you are supposed to be in the class, so while you are not attending the class. So I'm just here for answering questions. Can you just...
Thank you, Professor, for giving us today your time and dedication to this lecture. I don't know if it happened to you guys, but when I start chocolate, man, I have to finish it. It's like I can't have just one single square. So it's very interesting to know that there is like a mechanism in our brain. And domino effect. So, Professor, my question is, even though when I start the chocolate and I feel all these chemical reactions in myself and my spirit and my superior self, how can I stop? How can I tell my brain, hey, I need to stop right here. This is not good for my pancreas, this is not good for my body, this is not good for... And I think you can extrapolate this to alcohol maybe, you can extrapolate this to any kind of food, but for this chocolate.
If I was successful today to just raise an awareness to the level that there are hopes for being able to be in control by understanding what is happening inside your brain, I would be successful today. So I try today to give you an understanding that there are, first of all, we should know that the level of knowledge right now in the neuroscience community about what is happening in the brain for controlling temptation to different things is really reasonably well. The challenge is that we do not communicate that knowledge to the public. And there are many reasons for that. For example, one reason would be I'm not being paid for giving these type of talks. And even there might be people who would say that why you are doing these types of activities? You are supposed to be in your ivory tower of your lab and doing your scientific kind of research and publishing in prestigious journals. So we are not incentivized to go to the communities and try to communicate with people and see how we might even be able to find terms to interact with them. For example, I realized over time that, for example, saliency is something that we talk about a lot in our scientific community, but when we talk about salient cues, most of my clients here in Tulsa, they would not understand it. They don't know what salient means. And there are many other things that there are specific terms that we use in the scientific community, but people who are in other communities, they have other vernaculars for those terms. So I think that the first step would be just believing that there are many interesting things in neuroscience that would be helping for those interactions. And specifically for chocolate, I should also mention that things like chocolate, coffee, tea, they have ingredients inside that would be able to make higher level of craving other than just ingredients. And those things, so they could be more, we call it addictive compared to food. I mean the normal food. And even among different types of food, it seems that there are different levels of being addictive. So one issue for me as a neuroscientist, I was really interested to see how we might be able to even control those temptations. So I was a really eager tea man. I was drinking something like 6 cups of black tea every day. I was thinking that, can I stop drinking tea? And I tried it for a few days, and I was devastated. I was just feeling that I cannot. I was not able to work at all without drinking tea. And you can see that how much is. So I stopped drinking tea, and it took me something like 2 months to completely stop drinking any sort of caffeinated drinks. And usually when I kind of work with people who are in my community of working with something like those who are drug users, I usually ask them, are you in control of being able to stop your drinking coffee or tea or chocolate? And it's not easy. So I think that I usually suggest people, because I really label, I name what we do in the field, I name it as science of change. So I think the right name for what we are doing right now, what I'm doing in my lab, then the right name is science of change. The question is how we might be able to change people. But in the first place, the question would be how we might be able to change ourselves. So that is a major question. And I usually ask people that, okay, for example, tomorrow Marvin and I are going to run for something like 14 miles tomorrow. Yeah, we are going to. And last week we ran for something like 19 miles. And how people would start to do physical exercise. And I was a person that I was not able to run for 500 meters 5 years ago. Believe me. And it was something like 50 pounds more than what I'm right now. And with drug users, and one of them told me that, doctor, you're talking about drug craving and how to control your drug craving. Are you able to control your food craving? And I was thinking that he's right, I cannot. And I know that, and even I had a level of kind of dyspnea and shortness of breath, but I was not able to control my food craving. So you can see that how, I usually tell people that we usually we are as something like addiction medicine doctors, we really like to change people, but we are not able to change ourselves. So if we are talking to people, and I think it changed the process. So even today, I'm trying to change many other things inside myself. So first of all, I do not judge others, whether they are able to change something in themselves or they are not. One of the first things that you would start to learn is not to judge anybody around you. First, but you need to probably think about yourself and what are the things that you might be able to control in yourself. So going back to that, I think that we need to think about things like chocolate, even sodas. I mean, the Coke that we use. If you try, there are Diet Cokes that they do not have caffeine inside. And there are normal Diet Cokes, they have caffeine inside. If you just try these two types of Diet Cokes, in the first two sips, I can tell you that which one is caffeinated and the other is not caffeinated. Just based on the feelings that when you drink those Cokes, and how much we are really even dependent to drinking soda. I mean, there are starting to realize that what are the things that we are dependent, and sometimes it's not just about changing. Sometimes you feel that it's okay, I'm dependent to chocolate, but it's fine. It doesn't make any harm to my life. It is fine. But if you are, let's say you have fatty liver, you have lots of other problems that chocolate is just exacerbating those problems, then the question would be, and interestingly I realized over time that people who are trying to change themselves, when they have a problem, I had lots of people who were, let's say, pre-diabetics, those who are in the early stages of diabetes. They are really in a kind of dangerous situation. They really want to control their eating. But interestingly, I realized that we are less successful in helping these people, because the level of anxiety that they have makes things really complex. So you see that there are many people who really want to change, because they know that if they get diabetes, they know that their life would change forever and there would be lots of complications. But even on that stage, people cannot stop eating. So you see that how much this problem is complex. I know that I didn't kind of respond completely your question, but it is a process. It's not a simple answer for one talk, but I just try to open doors regarding potentials for hopes to change, and definitely there are many other ways as well. Sure. Any other question? Okay, have a super nice weekend, and those who have been interested, we will continue the discussion and potentially do something together. Thank you.